Okay, so this is Team 4B for our final project, and our first use case is to log into the server with a failed login, so using an incorrect username and password. We already have the server going over here and signed in, and there are no clients connected. So I'm going to hit start here on our client, and then on the server side, one set of credentials that we already have added as a client uses the username of test user and test password. But since we're doing an incorrect login, we're going to send over incorrect password and see if it lets us log in. So when you click login, it calls our login delegate and passes over the contents of the username box and the user password box. We step in here. This is our login method in the client controller, and it goes ahead and sets this client state to logging in, creates a new login object that we use for sending messages back and forth between the server. This is there's a main parent object called a message, and a login inherits from message. And then we send that login message, or after we construct it here with the username and password, we send that login message through a send delegate to the server communication control, or to the client communication controller. It will then serialize that message into a JSON string by calling this private helper method here, which will return a JSON string that describes the object, and it takes in that main base message object. And then if the WebSocket is alive, it will send that message. Since we put a breakpoint, the WebSocket isn't alive, so we can also talk about what happens here. If the WebSocket is alive, this send message will return true. Otherwise, it will return false to the client.
So here we are on our server communication controller, and we are in our on message, which takes in the message event args, and then we are using our process delegate to pass in the serialized message with the data that we are given to the ID. And so then if we go ahead and step into what we see next is you are going to see how our deserialized message works, and it takes in a string, and then we convert that we take that JSON and we deserialize it back into a message so that we can send it from the client to the server and back. And then we go right into the next thing, which is going to be our process message. And you can see that this takes in a message and a string, and we will create a list of the IDs. And if the message is of type login, which we had sent, we're going to call our process login method. And you can see in our process method login that we take in a login and a string, of course. And we create a new list of IDs, and then we loop through each of the clients that the model has currently. And if the client's username equals the login username, then we set the client's ID to the ID that was passed in. And then we go ahead and do our update login method, which will then create an object via calling validate credentials, passing in the username and password in the client. And this just simply checks if the username and the password equals what we thought it was, or what it should be. And if not, return false. And update login just brings in a bool and a binding list of items, and then we set that with the result in the current list. And so next, we check if the result is valid, and if it is, we're going to set that client to logged in. We're going to add them to our list of IDs, and we're going to send them a message saying that it was a valid login. And then we're going to show, and we do that by serializing the message that we pass in, and then we loop through all the strings, and then we send them the message. And then we go on to show our main view to the client, and then we also set the state to logged in.
Yeah, what's happening is basically this is just telling the server to check if there are new clients. So if they had logged in correctly, it would show a new client here, but it's not going to since that was an invalid login. Okay, the server lost connection again because of the breakpoints. So now we have sent a message to the server. The server has processed it. Since it was an incorrect login, it sent back a message to let us know. And this is the on message of the client that will be processing it. So it's going to use our process delegate here and call our deserialized message method here with the data sent over from the server. So we will go to our deserialized message method in the communication controller, and it's going to take that string and turn it back into a base class message. In this case, it's an update login message. So here it is constructing that from the data provided. And then it's going to call our process delegate from the client controller. So now we're back in the client controller processing the message. If the message is an update login message, then we are going to call the handle login method. So in handle login, it's going to take in that update login message. And if the login dot result here, so if it's true, it would update the login view and the client view so that way the user would be able to see what they've logged into. But since it's false, we are going to update the login view with client state.loginFail and set the controller state to client state.loginFail. And what this is going to do is here in that update method, which is our observer. It's going to set the state to the client state, which is login fail. And then if it is login fail, we're going to set the login label.text to login failed, try again, and reset the username and password boxes so that way the user can try to log in again. And if we skip through the rest of this, pulling out of methods, there we go. User sees login failed, try again because they entered a correct username, but not a correct password.
For our second use case, we'll be trying to place a bid that will be successful. So now we have our server form, which is up, and our client view. On the Nintendo Switch item, we added $450, which is more, which should be a successful bid. So now we are going to click place bid. And as we can see, breakpoint we put on the button, we have a bid delegate, which has the selected index of the item and a convert to decimal of the bid box.txt. So we step into that. We have our bid function, which has the index and the price of the object. So we're going to set our state to now our client state is bidding. And we have an if conditional that checks if the bid is valid on the proxy server. So we're not going immediately to the server. We're going to check just on our client side whether or not on the proxy server if the price and index is valid. In this case, it should be. So as we step in through that, we'll get the data on the proxy model. And then if we step through that, we'll get the data of that, and then go to that next if conditional. It should check if it's true, and in this case, it should be. So we'll go one step down, and then we'll see if the price is greater than the amount of the actual item, so the bid, and that should be true. So we'll return true there. So we step through that. That should return true. We'll step through, and we'll create a bid with the index and price. The index and price will be set based off of the bid that was set within the client form. So the bid is constructed there. And then we'll step through b.index is set to index and b.amount is set to price. And then we'll set a bool set to the send delegate of b, which is the bid. We'll construct a send message, and we'll go down to message, which will serialize the message, and it will return the serialized object with our correct settings. Stepping through that, we will check if a WebSocket is alive. Stepping through that, it probably shouldn't be true in this case because we were just doing the client side right now. We'll need to stop the video for a sec. But in this case, it should be true, so we will send it over to the server side.
All right, so now that a bid has been placed on the client side of things, it has been sent over the socket as a message and arrives here on our onMessage method, and it's going to be deserialized and then ran through our process delegate here. As we step through, we deconstruct the deserialized message into another bid object, and then we should be stepping out of it here and then continuing on into our process delegate method here. We then iterate through the process message by stepping through the current IDs and then looking to see if it's a login, but this time it's a bid. So we then cast the message as a bid object, and then we go through and we want to update our new list with our process bids by calling this process bid method here. In the process bid method here, we get the current items, and then we want to find the item at the selected index that the bid came in with. And then we want to get the current client ID that passed this message back to the server from its own side using the get clients method and the get client from ID method. We then step through the if conditional to check the current item status, to check and see if is it active, is it not active. We want to make sure that we're only allowing bids to go through on active items. And so once we step through that, if it's true, we then want to check if the current bid amount is less than the current item's price. So if any other bids had came in that were larger than it, then if it was a smaller amount in the bid item, or not bid item, but the bid message, we don't want it to go through. And so we would return a false bid back to the client if that was the case, where if the bid amount was less than the current item's price. Otherwise, and in this instance, we have a successful bid going through. We're changing the current item's price to the bid amount that was placed by the client, and then we set the last bidder's property for the item to the client's ID that sent the bid over, and then we increment the number of bids that have happened or occurred on that object that was bidded on. We then want to place in the bids at the current index of the new item list on the server side of that came along with the bid, the current item that was just bidded on that we're reinitializing essentially with. And then we want to check if there's any bids that are inside the controller, and our not the controller, our client that got passed over because we just got the ID for the client. And then we want to see if there's any other bids that are on the client. And if there aren't, then we want to add that bid to the client itself. We then want to update the item list for the model. And then we want to return a true message back to the clients, as well as the updated list of items that we've modified. So then it updates the proxy on the client side of things. And then we step back out after getting the new item list, and then we call the update list message to be sent back over to the clients here. And this should continue on dependent on how many clients are in the list. Because we just basically want to send that, hey, the bid has gone through successfully to the client that made the bid, and then not really change anything to the other clients, but we still want to update their lists. And then here's our send message method to send that update list message back on over to each client that is currently connected to the server. And here we're stepping through a couple of our helper methods for making sure that we are sending to all the currently connected clients the proper updated list. And then we want to make sure that that update list and the bid message that was processed gets sent back over to the clients. And then they get serialized and then should continuously be sent over across the session.
Okay, so our client and server lost connection again because of the breakpoint that we put. So here we are back at the client after sending the message to the server and getting the reply back with our bid. So here we have our process message delegate that's going to send over a deserialized message from our data from the WebSocket. So if we step in here, we get to our deserialize message method, which will then convert the JSON string back into a message object. In this case, it is, this is it going through and constructing the bid item through deserializing this message. And then we will send that deserialized message through our process delegate over to our client controller. And then here we have just a series of if statements to see what kind of a message it is. So here it's not an update login. It is an update list though. So it's going to cast M to an update list, and then it's going to check some properties of that list. If the my bid of the list is true, that lets the client know that this is an item, or this update list is in response to a bid they have made. So since in this case it was their bid and my bid is true from the server, it will step in here and call handle bid with the item list from the list and the result from the update list message. So here we go to handle bid in the client controller, and it's just going to check and see if the bid was valid from that update list message. If the bid is valid from it, it's going to take the item list that was sent, which is the new item list containing the updated bid, and it's going to update the list used for the model, and then it's going to call, here it is doing that, and then it's going to call the observer for the client view and send over bid state, bid succeed. So then here, if we go to the update list or the update delegate in the client view, if state is, and this is a state that we passed in, it is bid succeed. So we're going to set the auction ended label text to bid successful, which is just kind of a label that can be used for the status of different things going on. And then we're also going to recursively call update with client state.selected item, which since it's an invoke, I don't think it's going to show it, but basically that just refreshes all of the data binding and everything for the list so that new updated value will show up. And then here we set the client state to logged in, because after we've done all that, we're just logged in again, waiting for the user to do something or for a message from the server. And then we get out of here, and then this is back in our on message here after coming out of process. And if we look at the client view now, it says bid successful, and the minimum bid amount has been updated to reflect the bid that we placed.
Welcome back to the server side. We're going to add a product to our server. Now, as you see, we have this item at the top. I really like this item, so we're going to go ahead and add it, because with the add form, we kind of just add from the top like a stack, first out order. So we're going to go ahead and add this really nice answer sheet here. And in the add item button, we're going to hit our add delegate method, and we're just going to step into that. So first, we're going to get the popped item from the top of the stack. And the get popped item basically gets the first item in our list, and then creates a temporary item object, removes that object from the list, and then we just return that item. Because we want to be able to do this so we can then update our main view form for the server. And we want to make sure that the item that we've just popped is not null, because if it is, we don't want to really do anything at that point. So then we're going to go ahead and we're going to add the item to our model using our add item method, which just adds it to the item list that's currently in the server model. And then we get the current name as we iterate through all the items in that list. And then we're going to create an update list message, because we want to send out an update to every other client that's currently connected to the server saying, hey, we have a new item here. And we want to make sure that we have the other attributes in the attributes in the actual update list class call for when we create the new update list to be false, because we're not creating a bid. We're not doing anything funky. We're just updating the list of items. And so here we are, we're creating the new updated list because we just updated our list on the model site on the server. And then we're going to get a string of list of strings, which are the client IDs that we're going to send this out to. So up next, we're going to get each active client that is currently connected to the server from the server model using our get active clients method. And then basically it creates a new list, and then it iterates through all the clients in our get clients method here, which just returns a list of clients that are connected to the model. And then we want to make sure that they are currently logged in. And if they are, if they aren't, we're going to add them in. And then if, we're just going to step through this here then, because we only have 2 clients active right now. And then for each client, we're going to add the new ID to the list of IDs that we have, because we need to send this out. And then we're going to call our send delegate here, because we want to send the updated list So we're going to pass in our new update list message with the list of IDs. And then we're going to go through and serialize a message because we need to serialize our update list message with the new IDs. And we're going to call the JSON convert serialize method. And then we're going to iterate across each ID that we currently have stored in our list of IDs. And then we're going to send the new serialized message that we just created across the session over the WebSocket to each individual client. All right, so I want to apologize. One of the breakpoints that we had was active for long enough that a client dropped. So what we did is that we restarted the process and stepped through it exactly as we did in the previous recording. And both clients are currently active. So if somebody on the client side wants to pull up the current forms, the answer sheet should be showing on both of the clients.
It will once we step through all this code here. So that's our end result. So now we hit on message again and are going to process the string that we got from the server, our JSON string. We'll call our deserialized message and convert that JSON string to a message type object. In this case, this is it going through for bid items since it contains them, and it created that update list message. And then it's going to send that deserialized message object to our client controller through our process delegate. And then here, we'll just go through our if-else statements. And if the message is an update list, which it is, we'll go into this spot here. If lists my bid property is true, then we would handle it as if we made a bid. But since it's not true, we will handle it as just a list update. So we will pass in the lists item list into our handle update method down here. And then all we're going to do here is call model.updateList and send that new list of items to the model to be updated as the current item list. And then we will call our update client delegate that will update the client view to say, to check and see if there's new items. And in this case, there are. So we go to our update delegate or our update delegate observer in the client view and set the state to the client state. And if the state is selected item here, we're going to do all of this code in here. So kind of just walking through it here. Basically, we're just setting the data source of the item list in the client view and resetting all of those labels based on the index that is selected. So once we run all this, set the name label, minimum bid, time left, which is just a string, number of bids, status label ended, all of that stuff gets set. And then we step through here and we are done updating the client. We're coming out of the handle update method and we're coming out of deserialize message. And if we look and see here, now we have Jorge answer sheet available, no bids on it, cost 450 is the minimum bid, and that has been updated. And if we go over here to our second client view, which since there's also a breakpoint here, it has not been updated yet, but if we just hit continue here, they will also get the same result. So now both clients and our server have 4 items here.